Sweetheart, you're replaceable. That's what the new CEO said to me the day he signed my termination papers. He leaned back in the leather chair like a man who thought arrogance was a strategy. His suit too crisp, his grin too rehearsed. A predator who'd never missed a steak dinner, let alone a quarterly bonus. He didn't even look at me when he slid the paper across the desk. He looked at the window, as if the skyline was applauding him. I didn't say a word. Not when he smirked. Not when he said I should be grateful for the severance. And certainly not when he dismissed 15 years of sweat, loyalty, and results with a flick of his pen. He thought silence meant surrender. What he didn't understand was that silence sometimes means calculation. 10 minutes later, HR had me in a glass box, shoving a packet toward me like it was a birthday card. Severance numbers printed in polite black ink. Security waiting just outside the door, the same way they wait for a thief. My badge blinked red before I'd even signed the last page. They handed me a tote bag with the company logo, like that made it a clean goodbye. Like a piece of corporate swag could patch over the fact that they had just gutted their own lifeline with a lazy stroke of a pen. When I walked past my desk for the last time, my hand brushed against the spine of a worn leather folder. Edges curled, pages heavy with notes. That folder had followed me through layoffs, recessions, and midnight flights that bled into sunrise meetings. It wasn't just paper. It was memory, strategy, and 15 years of relationships no software could replicate. Every page was inked with something a CRM system could never understand. Trust. And trust has a longer shelf life than any CEO. The folder held more than history. It held leverage. Two of the biggest clients on our books, whales, as the sales teams love to call them, had clauses written in black and white. Key person dependency. My name. Spelled out. Explicit. No me, no contract. The kind of clause that isn't common in corporate law because it makes executives nervous. But my clients had insisted. They didn't buy a logo. They bought me. The new CEO didn't know that. Or worse, he didn't care. He thought everyone was a number on a spreadsheet. Replaceable, scalable, interchangeable. He thought AI emails and glossy webinars could replace the quiet power of a 6 a.m. phone call when a client's child was sick, or the handwritten thank you note I mailed after a renewal. He thought contracts were about signatures. I knew they were about people. On my monitor, taped to the corner, was a sticky note that had lived there for years. Check section 7.4. I wrote it late one night after another executive tried to edge me out of a deal I'd closed. It was my insurance policy. My quiet little grenade tucked into the fine print. That clause was going to matter. A lot more than they realized. I smiled when I saw it. Not the smile you give a friend, but the smile you give when you know the story isn't over. As I walked out, tote bag swinging at my side, the security guard gave me that half-sympathetic nod they save for people who just lost their jobs but didn't deserve to. My heels echoed against the tile, sharp, steady. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. My mind was already in the future, calculating the bleed they had just set in motion. And there would be a bleed. I counted it out in my head like drum beats. 2 weeks until Client A's renewal. 3 until Client B's quarterly review, each one anchored to my name. Each one wired directly into that old leather folder they thought was replaceable. Here's the thing about arrogance. It blinds people to the obvious. The CEO thought he'd cut out dead weight. What he'd actually done was light a fuse. By the time my tote bag hit the passenger seat of my car, I already knew how this was going to play out. 2 weeks wasn't long, but in corporate terms, it was an eternity. Plenty of time for cracks to widen into fractures. As the skyline shrank in my rearview mirror, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not anger. Peace, cold, clean peace. Because I wasn't the one scrambling. They were. They just didn't know it yet. And when the phone started buzzing 2 weeks later with whispers from the inside about chaos in the boardroom, I knew it had begun. The slow bleed, the unraveling. the storm building that no one could stop. They thought firing me ended the story. It was just the prologue. The first whisper came from a friend still inside. 2 weeks hadn't even passed when my phone lit up with a number I knew by heart. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Kira, client A just sent their termination notice. Legal's panicking." Her voice was hushed, like she was calling from a closet. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit, long enough that she finally added, "It's because of you, isn't it?" I didn't confirm. I didn't have to. She knew. Client A's contract was worth more in annual revenue than half of the CEO's pet projects combined. I'd spent years weaving that relationship brick by brick. Midnight dinners, early morning calls, last-minute flights to patch over problems before they grew teeth. And now, it was gone with a single email. Per Section 7.4, due to the Key Person Dependency Clause, we are terminating effective immediately. That line was the legal equivalent of a grenade pin. I laughed when I read it. Not from joy, not from spite, but from the absurdity. The CEO had dismissed me as replaceable, and now one clause he'd never bothered to read was costing him tens of millions. Inside the company, chaos spread like smoke. My friend in operations described it perfectly. It's like watching a kitchen catch fire while the head chef insists it's just the oven running hot. The new CEO tried to calm the board with buzzwords. Transition pains, expected churn, strategic pivot. But numbers don't bend to buzzwords. Revenue bleeding out isn't a pivot, it's a wound. Client B was next. I saw it coming. Their quarterly review was my ritual, a rhythm I'd never missed. I didn't need to call them. They already knew. When the new CEO sent a glossy slide deck and a mass email instead of a call, their CFO forwarded it to me with just 3 words. "This is insulting." I typed a polite reply, short and careful. "Per your contract, please see Section 7.4. That was all I needed to say. 2 days later, their termination notice hit the company inbox. $60 million gone. 2 clients that weren't logos. They were relationships. The call started then. First HR, then the CFO, then finally the CEO himself. His voice wasn't smug anymore. It was gravel and caffeine, the kind of tone men use when they've been awake too long staring at the ceiling. "You can't do this," he barked before I could even say hello. "We'll sue. We'll compel performance. You think you're clever, but you'll be back here in chains if I have to drag you." I let him rant. Let him spill threats like bullets into the receiver, because I knew something he didn't. The contract in my folder wasn't a shield. It was a sword. Section 7.4 wasn't vague. It was iron. Negotiated years ago after another exec tried to cut me out, fought line by line until counsel finally admitted, "If they sign this, you're bulletproof." So I smiled into the silence after his tirade and said calmly, "Then let's read the contract together." He hung up on me, but the invitation came anyway, sliding into my inbox under the subject line, "Emergency Strategy Session, Mandatory Attendance." I accepted, replied with a single line, "Please confirm counsel will be present." Because I wasn't stepping into that boardroom without a lawyer in the room to read the same words I was about to put in front of them. The night before the meeting, I spread everything across my dining table. Employment agreement, license contracts, performance reviews, email chains, 15 years of ink and signatures. It looked less like paperwork and more like a general's map before battle. I thought about what those papers represented. Not revenge, not pettiness, just proof. Proof that relationships can't be commoditized. Proof that loyalty means something, even if executives like him don't see it until it's gone. And maybe that's the message here. People remember who shows up for them. At the hospital, at their kids' science fair, at the midnight crisis no one else wanted to take. That's why the clients walked. Not because of a clause, but because they knew I was the one in their corner. You can't outsource that. You can't automate it. and you sure as hell can't replace it. When I finally closed the folder, I felt that same clean peace again. No adrenaline spike, no shaking hands, just certainty. Tomorrow, they'd sit across from me thinking they were still in control. But when the lawyer's eyes hit section 7.4, they'd realize the truth. They hadn't fired me. They'd handed me the detonator. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the HVAC, set low on purpose. Or maybe it was the tension hanging in the air. When I stepped through the glass doors, every eye shifted toward me. The CEO sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, coffee in a paper cup instead of his polished stainless tumbler. A small detail, but telling. Men like him don't switch habits unless sleep has stopped coming. The VP of sales was there too, the same one who'd grinned when I was walked out. He leaned back in his chair like this was theater, and I was the entertainment. HR sat rigid near the corner, flipping through papers they didn't need to flip. And next to the CEO sat the company's general counsel, glasses low on his nose, pen tapping a steady rhythm against the table. I carried only two things: a slim leather folio with 3 copies of my employment agreement and a separate folder marked in bold black ink, key person contracts. I took the seat they'd left at the far end of the table, my heels clicking against tile, tote bag set down gently at my side. Calm, silent. The kind of silence that makes other people nervous. The CEO started with bluster. "Kira, let's not waste time. You've already cost this company 2 major clients. That's breach of duty. Our position is simple. You return to assist with transitions, or we'll pursue legal remedies. We won't hesitate to compel performance." He said, compel performance like it was a threat carved in stone. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I just unzipped the folio slowly, the sound loud in the still room, and slid 1 copy of my employment agreement toward him, 1 toward counsel, and 1 toward HR. "Then let's read it together," I said, my voice even, steady. The VP smirked, whispering something under his breath. The CEO ignored him, flipping pages with the impatience of someone who expected to win by volume. Counsel, however, slowed down almost immediately. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slowed, lips pressing tighter as he reached section 7.4. That's where I had placed a yellow sticky flag. Counsel stopped tapping his pen. Read the line again. And again. His lips moved silently, tracing the words as if to confirm he hadn't misread them. Section 7.4. Upon termination without cause, any client designated as key person dependent shall have the right to terminate immediately, with all restrictions on employee solicitation or competition dissolved. He adjusted his glasses. Read the next clause. Any attempt to compel post-termination performance shall trigger a mandatory buyout equal to 2.5 times the trailing 12-month revenue of key person contracts. His pen fell silent. He looked up at me, then at the CEO, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest verdict in the room. The VP scoffed. Generous language, no way that holds up. I turned my head slowly toward him. It's not generous, it's signed. And then I reached into the separate folder and slid out 3 stapled packets. Contracts for Client A, Client B, and Client C, each one with my name highlighted in bold under Key Person Dependency. The sound of paper sliding across the polished table was almost theatrical. Counsel picked one up, scanned it, and let out the faintest exhale. These are enforceable. His tone was low but final. The CEO leaned back, shoulders tightening as if he could physically distance himself from the words on the page. We never agreed to. You did, I said. Calm, measured. You agreed when you signed my renewal 3 years ago. The same renewal you never read because you were too busy rushing to the golf course. Counsel approved it. HR filed it. And now it's binding. HR shuffled their papers again, but this time not to stall, to hide the flush creeping up their neck. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to sit with it. This isn't about me refusing to help, I added finally. It's about the fact that you can't compel what you don't own. Those clients didn't sign with your logo. They signed with me. You thought I was replaceable. They disagreed. The VP tried again, louder this time. This is extortion. You're holding the company hostage. Counsel didn't even look at him. He just read the clause again out loud, slowly, deliberately. Mandatory buyout equal to 2.5 times the trailing 12-month revenue. His voice was steady, but his face had gone pale. That number wasn't small. The CEO's pen slipped in his hand. He set it down like it was suddenly too heavy. HR finally stopped shuffling papers altogether. And for the first time since I walked into that boardroom, the smirk fell from the VP's face. I folded my hands on the table. My voice stayed calm. This is arithmetic, not emotion. You fired me without cause. You broke trust with the clients. Now the contract does what it was designed to do. Protect the relationships I built. I tapped the page lightly once. You don't need to like it. You just need to pay it. No one spoke after that. Not for a long moment. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence, sharp and electric. And in that silence, I knew. The tide had turned. The silence in the boardroom wasn't polite. It was the kind of silence that hangs in the air when everyone realizes the numbers no longer work in their favor. The general counsel broke it first. He leaned forward, pressing his palm flat against section 7.4, like he needed to hold the words in place. We need trailing revenue numbers for these contracts, he said quietly. Not to me, but to the CFO seated 2 chairs away. The CFO didn't argue. He didn't even look up, just snapped his fingers at a junior analyst by the door. The analyst left in a hurry, laptop open, moving the way people move when they know they've been sent to fetch the guillotine. The CEO tried to fill the gap with noise. This is absurd. Clients don't just walk away from relationships this size over one person. Churn is normal. They'll come back once emotions settle. I let him talk. Let him twist the narrative in his head. Because what he didn't understand was that relationships weren't a funnel metric. They were living, breathing things. And when you insult them with canned webinars and mass emails, they don't come back. They leave. The door opened again. The analyst whispered numbers into the CFO's ear, and the CFO's shoulders slumped like a man watching his bonus dissolve in front of him. He scribbled something on a notepad, then slid it toward counsel. Counsel read it once, then twice. His pen stopped moving altogether. High 7 figures, he said finally, voice low but clear enough for the whole table. Multiply that by 2.5. The air thinned. Everyone knew what that meant. The VP was the first to crack. She's bluffing. No way those clauses are enforceable. No court. Counsel cut him off, glasses sliding down his nose. They're enforceable, they were signed, and they're already triggered. The VP went quiet. The CEO leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like the tiles might offer an escape hatch. His face was pale now, his arrogance gone, replaced by something closer to disbelief. And then I spoke, calm, deliberate. You call it absurd. I call it arithmetic. Client A walked, Client B walked. That's $60 million in annual revenue already gone. Add the buyout, and you're looking at damages no pep talk can erase. I paused, letting the numbers settle over them like weight. But that's not the only arithmetic at play. You've used my materials since my termination. Lighthouse scripts, retention frameworks. Every login has a timestamp. That's willful infringement. Fee shifting applies, which means you don't just pay damages. You pay my attorney fees on top. The HR director finally spoke, voice brittle. We thought those documents were company property. I reached into my folder and slid across the most recent license agreement, the expiration date circled in red ink. They were licensed, not assigned. And the license expired the day you walked me out. No renewal, no payment. Every use since then is a breach. Counsel read it, his lips pressed into a thin line. She's right. The CEO rubbed his temples with both hands, the way people do when a headache turns into a migraine. What do you want? His voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was tired. That was the moment the power shifted completely. I pulled 2 envelopes from my folio, labeled in neat black letters. Option A and Option B. I set them side by side on the polished table. You can open them now or later, I said evenly, but the clock is already running. The CFO stared at the thicker envelope, then looked away quickly. Counsel adjusted his glasses, scanning my face as if to gauge whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. Option A, I continued, is your narrow escape. Retain me as an independent consultant at $900 an hour, 200 hours minimum, paid in advance. You reinstate the Lighthouse license for 12 months at triple the previous rate, and the VP resigns effective immediately. The VP's head snapped toward me, his mouth open, but I didn't give him room to interrupt. Option B, I said, tapping the second envelope lightly, is cleaner but bloodier. I decline. I join your competitor, who already has my 3 whales signed and sealed. You wire the buyout amount plus infringement damages by Friday at 5 p.m. No extensions, no negotiations. The VP tried again, louder this time. This is extortion. I tilted my head, meeting his eyes with the calm patience of someone watching a child throw a tantrum. Then I turned back to counsel. Is it extortion when it's written in the contract you approved? Counsel didn't look at the VP, didn't look at me. He just closed the agreement with a soft thud and said quietly, It's enforceable. The room sagged under the weight of those 2 words. I sat back, folding my hands loosely in my lap. No gloating, no dramatics, just arithmetic. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's paper, signatures, and numbers written in ink dark enough to bleed through. And they had just realized the bill was coming due. No one touched the envelopes. Counsel asked for 10 minutes. We all stood. I stepped into the hallway where the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Through the glass, I could see the CEO leaning over Counsel's shoulder, while the CFO punched numbers into a calculator that looked too small for the size of the mistake. When they called me back in, the CEO tried for neutral. Option A with modifications, he said. Rate reduced, no advance, and no mention of... His eyes flicked to the VP. Personnel changes. I shook my head once. No. He exhaled through his nose. Then option B is impossible by Friday. Treasury cycles. You can escrow by noon and wire by deadline, I said. Your bank knows how. Counsel didn't argue. He knew I was right. He only asked, Are your clients actually signed with the competitor? I slid a sheet across the table. 3 letters, each on the competitor's letterhead, each naming me as key person. Not bravado. Paper. Counsel's face changed the way horizons change when a storm arrives. He leaned toward the CEO and whispered, barely audible, Oh my God. That was the first honest thing anyone had said all day. The VP tried a different angle. You realize how this makes you look in the market? Not a team player. Burning bridges. I didn't take the bait. I didn't set the fire, I said. You did when you told the clients they'd get a webinar instead of a call. Silence again. The kind that makes the hum of the lights sound like a wire about to snap. 48 hours, the CEO said finally, voice thin. We'll decide. You have 24, I answered. The clock is not your asset anymore. I left the building the same way I'd left 2 weeks earlier. Heels steady, toed at my side, eyes forward. At home, I laid everything out again. Contracts, licenses, access logs. Not because I doubted the case. because order calms the mind. I brewed tea. I answered 2 texts from old colleagues. Short, neutral. I slept. Morning brought an email at 7:12 a.m. Subject line, Option A, revised. I opened it. Lower rate, fewer hours, license at the old price. No resignation. It read like someone bargaining with a locked door. I replied with 1 sentence. My offer stands until Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. At 10:03 a.m., counsel called from a blocked number. If we take B, he said quietly, we'll need your assurance of no public statements. Standard mutual non-disparagement, I said. And a release of claims. You'll want one too. We will, he said. Pause. Your access logs, where did you get them? I set alerts on shared folders that contained my license materials, I said. They pinged after I was terminated. Dates, IPs, user IDs. Another pause. Right. Paper shuffling. Expect a draft. By noon, escrow confirmation hit my inbox. By 2, the settlement draft arrived. Wire by Friday, 5 p.m. Buyout per 7.4. Fees per the license breach. Mutual releases. Non-disparagement. No admission of fault. The usual fiction 2 parties tell when math is the only language left. I asked for 1 change. A 1-paragraph acknowledgement. Lighthouse is an employee-originated methodology licensed on a term basis. Ownership remains with the creator. It wasn't about pride. It was about closing the loop so no one in any future meeting could pretend they hadn't known. Counsel agreed without a fight. At 4:43 p.m. Friday, my banking app flashed. The wire landed. Big number, small screen. I took a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and then forwarded the confirmation to counsel with a single line. Received. He replied 3 minutes later. Settlement effective upon confirmation. No signatures, no speeches, just the quiet end of something that should never have been started. I didn't celebrate. I washed the tea mug I'd used all week and set it on the rack. Then I opened a plain cardboard box and slid the old company tote inside. Donation pile. It wasn't anger. It was housekeeping. On Monday, I took the elevator up to the competitor's office. New badge, new photo. Same work. Protecting relationships that actually mean something. Their COO shook my hand and said, "We're not buying your contacts. We're investing in your judgment." It sounded like a line until I saw the way their account teams worked. Calls before slides, names before numbers. That afternoon, I called each client, not to spike the ball, just to set expectations. Clean transitions, no fireworks. We'll do this right, I told them. No one gets hurt for sport. They appreciated that. People always do. In the quiet after, I opened the leather folder one last time. The sticky note. Check section 7.4 was still there, edges curling. I peeled it off and stuck it to the inside cover of a fresh notebook. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Read closely, fight early, write it down. A friend from the old place texted later. They're blaming the economy. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before I settled on the only true one. They confuse tools with trust. Here's the part I hope someone hears. People aren't head count. They're the moat. You don't keep clients because your logo is big. You keep them because you showed up when their life was messy and their calendar was full and your help wasn't convenient. You keep them because you told the truth, early and often, even when lawyers winced. Contracts matter. So do casseroles and hospital visits and remembering a kid's name. One without the other is just a transaction. The other without one is just hope. Together, they're a bond. As the sun slid down the glass of the opposite tower, an email pinged from the competitor's CFO. Welcome aboard. Your calendar is full. Your runway is clear. I smiled at the phrasing. Full. Clear. 2 words that rarely travel together. I closed the folder. slid it into the drawer. The story wasn't revenge anymore. It was arithmetic and choices, and the simple fact that I refused to be reduced to a line item by a man who thought volume equals power. He said I was replaceable. The clients decided otherwise.